Ethan Blackwood, the coldest millionaire in the city, fell to his knees before his housekeeper. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "I've searched for you in every life." Emily, trembling, replied, "Me too." And they both saw the same vision. 5 centuries ago, the same faces, the same promise. This is the story of a love that transcended 5 centuries. Ethan Blackwood had it all. At 38 years old, he owned a real estate empire that moved millions. His mansion, Blackwood Manor on the Hill, dominated the city skyline like a modern-day castle. Imported Carrara marble, Waterford crystal chandeliers, artwork that cost more than entire houses. But there was something that money could never buy: peace. Since childhood, Ethan had the same dreams, always the same woman. Dark hair, deep eyes, a face he had never seen in real life, but knew better than his own reflection. In his dreams, he searched for her, ran across battlefields, sailed across oceans, shouted her name in languages he didn't know how to speak. And he always woke up with the same sense of loss, as if he had lost something essential, as if he were incomplete. Psychologists called it ancestral memory. Spiritualists spoke of past lives. Ethan, pragmatic and skeptical, preferred to ignore it. He buried his unrest in work, building skyscrapers, while his heart remained in ruins. And no one noticed. To the world, Ethan Blackwood was untouchable. To himself, he was a man adrift, searching for something impossible to name. If you've ever felt like you're searching for someone without knowing who, you'll understand what happened on that day in October. It was an ordinary morning when everything changed. Ethan needed a new housekeeper. The previous one had quit, claiming the mansion was too big and the boss was too cold. The agency sent 3 candidates. He barely glanced at the first 2. And then Emily Carter entered the room. The world stopped. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The air rushed from his lungs. His hands trembled, because the face before him was the face from his dreams, not similar, not alike. It was exactly the same. The same dark, deep eyes, the same curve of the lips, the same expression, between vulnerable and strong. 15,000 nights, dreaming of that face, and there she was, as in the flesh, wearing a faded navy blue uniform and carrying a patched-up bag. Emily Carter was 29 years old and carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. She worked as a housekeeper to support her sick grandmother. Grandma Rose, 82 years old, needed expensive medications that the public system didn't provide. So Emily worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, woke up at 5 in the morning, took 2 buses, cleaned the homes of people who didn't even look at her. And at night, she returned to the small apartment on the outskirts of town, prepared dinner for her grandmother, and finally slept. And when she slept, she dreamt. Always the same dream. A man with intense eyes, wearing old clothes, holding her hands and saying, "I've searched for you in every life." Emily woke up with tears in her face and an emptiness in her chest, as if she had lost something precious, as if part of her was missing. And when she entered that gigantic mansion, when she saw the tall, elegant man in the black suit, when her eyes met his, Emily felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She knew that face. God. She knew that face. Ethan tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He coughed, regained his composure, and asked the standard questions. Previous experience, availability, references. Emily responded on autopilot, but her eyes never left his. There was something there, something impossible, something that made her heart race and her skin crawl. When Ethan reached out to shake her hand in formal greeting, the touch was like an electric shock. Both recoiled instinctively. Ethan clenched his fists. Emily hid her hands behind her back. And at that moment, without either of them knowing why, they both felt the same thing. Recognition. Ethan hired her on the spot. Didn't even check the references. Didn't call the contacts. Just said, "You start tomorrow." Emily accepted, stunned, and left the mansion, walking like a sleepwalker. On the bus back home, she leaned her forehead against the window and thought, "I know that man, but how? From where?" That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, his heart racing. Her face. It was the face from his dreams, and there was no doubt. But how? Reincarnation, coincidence, madness. He got up, went to the office, opened his laptop, searched. Recurring dreams, same person. Genetic memory, past lives. The more he read, the more confused he became. Science had no answers. Spirituality offered many, but none satisfied. Ethan closed the laptop and looked out the window. Down below, the city slept. And somewhere in that immensity, Emily Carter was also awake, thinking of him, because Emily didn't sleep either. She sat in the kitchen of the small apartment, holding a cup of tea that went cold, untouched. Grandma Rose, her grandmother, appeared, shuffling her feet, wrapped in an old robe. "Honey, are you okay? You look pale." Emily looked at her grandmother, and the question came out before she could stop it. "Do you believe in reincarnation?" Grandma Rose smiled, a mysterious and sad smile. She sat down next to her granddaughter, held her hand, and said, "Some souls never forget, honey. Not even after 5 centuries. Emily woke up with the alarm at 5 in the morning, took a shower, put on her clean uniform, took the 2 buses. At 7 o'clock sharp, she rang the doorbell of the mansion. Ethan opened the door personally. He said nothing, just gestured for her to come in, and when Emily passed by him, Ethan closed his eyes and inhaled. And he smelled it. Lavender. It was her perfume, or rather her scent. And it was exactly the scent he smelled in his dreams. Lavender and something else. Something sweet. Something impossible to describe, but unmistakable. Ethan showed her the mansion. 3 floors and 8 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms. She would have to clean everything. Emily nodded, took the cleaning cart, and started to work. But it was impossible to concentrate, because every time she passed Ethan, every time their eyes met by accident, it was as if invisible rays crossed the air. There was an energy, a connection, something that had no name, but that they both felt with painful intensity. At lunchtime, and Ethan called Emily to the kitchen. He had prepared sandwiches. It wasn't normal. Bosses didn't prepare food for maids, but Ethan couldn't help it. He wanted to be near her. He wanted to hear her voice. He wanted to understand what was happening. They ate in silence, and then Ethan asked, "Do you have any siblings?" Emily shook her head. "Just me and my grandma. My parents died when I was a child." Ethan nodded. Solitude recognizes solitude. And then Ethan asked the question that would change everything. "Do you have any birthmarks?" Emily froze. The question was odd, invasive, but something in Ethan's voice compelled her to answer. "I do. On my right wrist. It's star-shaped." Ethan felt his blood run cold. His vision darkened, because he too had a birthmark. On his right wrist, star-shaped, exactly the same. He stood, walked over to her, and without asking permission, pulled up the sleeve of his own shirt. Emily looked. She saw the mark, a small constellation of dots in the shape of a star, identical to hers. Her eyes widened. She lifted her own sleeve, showed him her wrist, and there it was, the same mark, in the same place, the same size. "This mark," Ethan whispered, and his voice was broken, hoarse, desperate. "I've seen it in every dream of my life." Emily recoiled. The chair fell. She was trembling, because that mark was the proof. The proof that she wasn't crazy. The proof that the dreams meant something. Ethan was trembling too. He looked at her and said, "I've been dreaming about you since I was a child. Every night. The same face. The same voice. And I look for you. I always look for you. But I never find you." He took a step forward. Until now, Emily wanted to run, wanted to flee from Blackwood Manor, from this man, from this impossible truth. But her feet were rooted to the floor, because she also dreamed, she also searched. And maybe, just maybe, she had finally found him. "Me too," she whispered. "I too dream of you for years, forever." The silence that followed was dense, heavy, charged with something bigger than both of them. Ethan stepped back, ran a hand through his hair, tried to rationalize. "This is insane. This doesn't make any sense." But Emily shook her head. She pulled something from her pocket, an antique locket of tarnished silver hanging on a fine chain. "It was my great-grandmother's. Grandma Rose left it to me before she died. Said it was important, that I should always wear it." Emily opened the locket. Inside, there was an inscription engraved in old letters, almost erased by time. EB to EC, eternally. Ethan felt the world spin. EB, Ethan Blackwood. That was his name in the dreams. And EC, Emily Carter. Ethan and Emily. "Where did you get this?" He took the locket, held it up to the light. The silver was ancient, very old. "Centuries," Emily replied. "My great-grandmother said it had been in the family for generations, since 1525. 1525. 5 centuries ago. If you're feeling chills now, imagine how they felt. Because Ethan and Emily had just discovered that their souls had known each other for 5 centuries. And that maybe, just maybe, they had been searching for each other in every life since then. Some connections transcend time, some promises cross centuries, and some souls, no matter how much fate tries to separate them, always find their way back. Ethan and Emily stood there, in silence, holding the locket between them, feeling the weight of 500 years on their shoulders. And then Ethan did something that surprised them both. He took her hand, not a formal handshake, a real touch, skin against skin. And when their fingers intertwined, when his birthmark touched her birthmark, something happened. A wave of heat, a feeling of completeness, as if two halves finally fit together, as if the universe sighed in relief. Emily looked at him and saw tears in his eyes. Ethan, the cold and untouchable millionaire, was crying. "I've waited so long," he whispered, "and didn't even know what I was waiting for. Until now." Emily cried too, because she understood. She had always known something was missing, and now, finally, she had found it. But reality is cruel. And as they stood there, hands intertwined, birthmarks touching, a thought crossed both their minds. He was a millionaire, she was the housekeeper. He lived at Blackwood Manor on the hill. She could barely afford rent. 5 centuries ago, maybe the roles were different, but now, in this life, the social abyss between them was gigantic. And they both knew that the world wouldn't accept it, that the class difference would create obstacles, that fate, once again, might try to separate them. Ethan slowly released her hand. Emily took a step back. The magic of the moment dissipated, replaced by harsh reality. "I need to get back to work," Emily said, and her voice was firm, but broken. Ethan nodded. "Of course." And she left the kitchen, picked up her cleaning cart, and went back to work. But her hands were trembling, and every surface she cleaned, every room she tidied, was done on autopilot because her mind was stuck in that moment, in that touch, in that mark, in that locket. And Ethan returned to the study, closed the door, and collapsed into the chair. He looked at his wrist. The star-shaped mark glowed under the light, and for the first time in his life, Ethan Blackwood, the man who had everything, realized that he was completely lost, because how do you explain to the world that you found your 500-year-old soulmate in the form of your housekeeper? How do you rationalize something that defies all logic? And more importantly, what do you do when fate finally delivers what you've been searching for your entire life, but the circumstances make it impossible to attain? Ethan had no answers. So he did what he always did. He researched, opened his laptop, typed Ethan Blackwood, 1525, pressed enter, and waited. The results appeared slowly. Historical pages, colonial documents, and then he saw it, an academic article about English soldiers in the colonization of the Americas. And there, in the middle of a list of names, was Ethan Blackwood, soldier, killed in battle in 1526, betrothed to Emily Carter, daughter of a prominent landowner, died before the wedding. Ethan's blood froze. He clicked on the link, read more. Emily Carter waited a year for her betrothed's return. When she learned of his death, she sickened with grief. Died in 1527, was buried with the locket that Ethan had given her. The locket. Ethan jumped up, ran to the kitchen. Emily was cleaning the floor. He stopped in the doorway, breathless. She looked at him, startled. He held out his phone. "You need to see this." Emily dropped the cloth, wiped her hands, took the phone, read. And as she read, the color drained from her face. No, this isn't possible. But it was there, documented, historical, real. Ethan Blackwood and Emily Carter, betrothed, separated by death, united by a promise. "I've searched for you in every life. Do you also dream about the battlefield?" Ethan asked, and his voice was just a whisper. Emily nodded slowly. "I see you falling. I see blood. I see you saying you'll come back. And I wait. I always wait. But you never return." Ethan closed his eyes. "I see the same thing. I see you crying. I see you waiting. And I try to come back, and I run, I scream. But I never can. Until now. 5 centuries. 5 centuries since Ethan Blackwood promised to search for Emily Carter in every life. 5 centuries since she vowed to wait. And there they were, in a modern kitchen. He in a tailored suit. She in her work uniform. Bearing the same faces, the same marks, the same unwavering promise. Destiny had flipped their roles. He, now wealthy. She, now working class. But their souls remained constant, recognizing, yearning, finally finding. And as Ethan and Emily gazed at each other across that kitchen, they both knew that something had irrevocably shifted. There was no turning back. The truth had been unveiled, the connection revealed. And now, only one question remained. What were they going to do about it? But fear can be a more powerful force than reason. And in the days that followed, Ethan did what he always did when something terrified him. He ignored it. He barricaded himself in his office, immersed himself in meetings, sealed deals. He avoided Emily at all costs. When he saw her cleaning, he'd change direction. When she was brewing coffee, he'd wait until she had left the room to pour himself a cup. Because looking at her meant admitting the impossible. It meant accepting that everything he thought he knew about reality was wrong. And Ethan Blackwood didn't accept being wrong. Ever. Emily noticed the distance, and it hurt. It stung because she had opened her heart, shown him the locket, confessed her recurring dreams, and now he avoided her as if she were carrying some dread, contagious disease. So Emily retreated as well. She stopped asking questions, cleaned in silence, cooked in silence, left in silence. And at night, back in her small apartment, she wept. Grandma Rose held her hand and said, "Honey, some truths are too frightening to be accepted all at once." But Emily had no patience for waiting. She had already waited 5 centuries. How much longer would destiny demand? 3 days passed in strained silence. Ethan worked. Emily cleaned. 2 strangers sharing the same space and thus avoiding glances, avoiding touches, avoiding the truth. Until on the 4th night, Ethan had the dream again. But this time, it was different, more vivid, more real. He was on the battlefield, blood everywhere, soldiers screaming, and he, wounded, lying on the ground, clutching the locket and whispering, "I've searched for you in every life, in Emily, I promise." And then he saw her, standing on top of a hill, flowing white dress, outstretched hands, crying, waiting, always waiting. Ethan woke up screaming. Sweat soaked the sheets, heart pounding. 3 a.m. He got up, went to the window, and stared out at the sleeping city. And it dawned on him, he couldn't run anymore. The truth didn't simply vanish just because it was ignored. Emily was real. The locket was real. The connection was real. And he, Ethan Blackwood, a man of logic and reason, had to accept the impossible. The next morning, when Emily arrived, Ethan was waiting by the door. She stopped, surprised. He didn't offer a greeting, didn't ask how she was doing. He simply stated, "We need to talk." Emily nodded, and they went back to the kitchen, the place where it all began. Ethan poured them both coffee, sat down opposite her, and spoke. "I've spent the last 3 days trying to rationalize this, trying to find a logical explanation, coincidence, genetic memory, suggestion, anything other than, you know, reincarnation." Ethan chuckled without humor, but I couldn't, because it all fits. The dreams, the marks, the locket, the historical names. He looked at her. "And you. I know you, Emily. I know your scent. I know your voice. I know the way you look when you're sad. And I shouldn't. Because I've only known you for 4 days, but it feels like I've known you for 5 centuries. Tears streamed down Emily's face, because she understood. She had also fought against the truth, had also tried to deny it. But the heart doesn't lie, and her heart recognized Ethan as something essential, something that had always been missing. "Me too," she whispered. "I know you too. I know you take your coffee black. I know you have a scar on your back. I know you wake up at 5 a.m. without an alarm, and I don't know how I know, I just do." Ethan blinked. "The scar. How do you know about the scar?" Emily froze. Because she shouldn't know. She had never seen his back. He always wore a shirt. So how? "I saw it in the dream," she said slowly. "You were down, wounded, and I saw the scar. It was a line on your back, left side, near your shoulder blade. Ethan stood up, turned his back to her, and pulled off his shirt. There, exactly where Emily had described, was a scar, old, from childhood. A bicycle accident when he was 7. But in her dream, it was from a sword, from a battle. Ethan turned back to face her. How? Emily, how do you know this? And she shook her head, as lost as he was. I don't know. I just saw it. I saw you falling. I saw the sword cutting. I saw you dying. The silence in the kitchen was oppressive. And then Ethan sat down again, put his shirt back on, and spoke the words that would change everything. I believe you. I believe in us. I believe this is real. I don't know how. I don't know why. But I believe. Emily sobbed. Because those words were everything she needed. Validation, acceptance, someone who finally believed. What would you have done? If you were them, would you have run from the truth or embraced it? Leave it in the comments. Ethan and Emily spent that morning talking, sharing dreams, comparing details. And the more they spoke, the clearer it became they had lived before, 5 centuries ago. Ethan described the castle where Emily lived in his dreams. Emily described the military camp where Ethan slept. They knew the names of people who had never existed in this life, knew places they had never visited, knew a history that shouldn't be possible to remember. And then Emily said something that made Ethan freeze. In that life, I was wealthy, and you were poor. He was a soldier, a farmer's son. No name, no fortune, and I was the governor's daughter. My father forbade the marriage, said you weren't worthy, but I didn't care. I loved you anyway. Emily looked around the mansion. And now, the roles are reversed. You're rich. I'm poor. And again, the world will say we're not worthy of each other. Ethan took her hand. To hell with the world. I've searched for you for 5 centuries. I won't let opinions tear us apart again. But even as he said it, they both knew the truth. The world does matter. Society judges. And a romance between a millionaire and his housekeeper would be a scandal, would be headline news, would be destruction. But before they could discuss it further, something strange happened. Emily, still holding her coffee, began to hum a low, soft melody in a language she didn't recognize. Ethan froze, because he knew that melody. It was the song of the dreams. The song she sang to him before he fell asleep. 5 centuries ago. Emily stopped, realizing what she was doing. Where did that come from? She was pale, confused. I don't recognize this song. I've never heard it before, but it's swirling around in my head. Ethan slowly stood up. That's archaic Spanish, from the 16th century. He grabbed his cell phone, started recording and pleaded, "Sing it again." Emily, still trembling, sang. The melody flowed naturally, as if it had been sung 1,000 times. Ancient words, pronounced perfectly, in a dialect that no longer existed. Ethan played the recording back into a translation app, and the words appeared. No importa cuánto tiempo pase, mi alma te buscará. Te amaré en cada vida. Esperaré hasta el fin del mundo. No matter how much time passes, my soul will search for you. I will love you in every life. I will wait until the end of the world. Emily covered her mouth with her hands. Ethan dropped his phone. Because this wasn't just a memory. This was a living memory. Engraved so deeply in Emily's soul that it transcended lifetimes. She had sung it to him 5 centuries ago, and now, without knowing how or why, she sang it again, The evidence wasn't just coincidence anymore. It was proof. At that moment, Ethan made a decision. He called his assistant and cancelled all his appointments for the week. Then, he looked at Emily and said, "We're going to Mexico City." Emily blinked. "What? Why?" "Because," Ethan explained, "if Diego de Alvarado and Lucia de Mendoza lived in 1525, there must be records, documents, maybe even portraits. I need more than just dreams and melodies, Em. I need concrete proof, and you're coming with me." Emily wanted to say she couldn't, that she had work, that Grandma Rose needed her. But Ethan was already calling Grandma Rose, explaining that Emily would be traveling for a few days, that he'd cover all the costs, that he'd hire a nurse to stay with her. And Grandma Rose, wise and mysterious as always, just laughed and said, "Go, honey, we seek the truth," and close this circle. 2 days later, Ethan and Emily were on a private jet headed to Mexico City. Emily had never flown before. She pressed her face against the window, seeing the clouds, feeling the impossible becoming real. Ethan sat next to her, and for the first time in days, he smiled. A real smile. Because for the first time in his life, he felt like he was on the right path, not building skyscrapers, not closing deals, but seeking something that really mattered. They landed at noon. A driver took them directly to the General Archive of the Nation. Ethan had scheduled a meeting with the director, a historian named Dr. Ramirez. She greeted them with curiosity. "It's rare to receive requests about specific soldiers from the 16th century. What exactly are you looking for?" Ethan explained. "Diego de Alvarado, Spanish soldier, killed in battle in 1526, promised to Lucia de Mendoza, daughter of a governor." Dr. Ramirez typed into her computer, frowning, clicking through files. And then her eyes widened. "Interesting. We have records of Diego de Alvarado." She turned the screen. And here it is. Diego de Alvarado, soldier under Cortez's command, killed in battle against rebel tribes on June 20th, 1526. She clicked some more. And here, Lucia de Mendoza, daughter of Francisco de Mendoza, colonial governor. She died a year later, in May of 1527, cause of death recorded as a profound sadness. Ethan and Emily exchanged glances. It was all there, documented, real. But Dr. Ramirez wasn't finished. She clicked on another file. "And you're going to want to see this." And that's when she opened the box. Inside the archive box, protected by centuries of careful preservation, was a letter. Yellowed paper, faded ink, but still legible. Written in Old Spanish. Dr. Ramirez put on gloves, took the letter out carefully, and read aloud. "From Diego de Alvarado to Lucia de Mendoza, written 3 days before his death." She translated as she read. "My beloved Lucia, if these words reach you, it means I will not return, but know that my love transcends this life. Te buscaré en cada vida. No matter where you are, no matter who you are, my soul will recognize yours, and we will be together again. I promise. Eternally yours, Diego." The silence in the archive room was absolute. Emily was crying. Ethan was speechless. Dr. Ramirez watched them with an expression somewhere between fascinated and frightened. And then she said, "You resemble them, you know?" She clicked again, opening a digitized image. "It's a portrait we found 5 years ago, in a private collection. It was sold to the National Museum of History. It's on permanent display in the colonial wing." The image loaded slowly, and when it appeared on the screen, the world stopped. It was an old portrait, painted in oil, worn by time, and in it, 2 faces. A man in military uniform, a woman in a colonial dress, and the faces were unmistakable. It was Ethan. It was Emily. not just resembling. Identical. The same eyes, the same mouth, the same expression, 500 years apart, but the souls were the same. Emily collapsed into her chair. Ethan gripped the table to keep from falling. Dr. Ramirez looked at them as if she were seeing ghosts. And maybe she was. Because there, before her, were two people who shouldn't exist. Two people who proved that some stories transcend time, that some souls really don't forget, that some promises really are eternal. Ethan looked at Emily. Emily looked at Ethan, and they both knew. There was no more doubt. There was no more denial. They had lived before. They had loved before. They had lost each other before. And now, 500 years later, they had found each other again, and that's when she opened the other box, and inside that box, protected in clear plastic, was the medallion, the original medallion, of ancient silver, exactly like the one Emily wore. Dr. Ramirez explained, "It was found buried with Lucia de Mendoza. When they exhumed the tomb for archaeological study, it was in her hand, as if, even in death, she couldn't let it go." Ethan took the box, looked at the medallion, and then looked at the one Emily wore around her neck. They were identical, because they were the same. Or rather, they were a pair. Ethan had given one to Emily 500 years ago, and somehow, through generations, through centuries, the medallion had found its way back. Dr. Ramirez watched everything in silence, and then asked, in a soft voice, "Do you really believe that you are them, don't you? That you are Diego and Lucia de Alvarado y Mendoza, reincarnated?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked at Emily. She was holding her own medallion, tears streaming down her face. And Ethan said, "I don't know what I believe, but I know what I feel. And I feel like I've waited 500 years for her." Some people will pause here. They'll process the impossible. They'll question reality. And that's okay, because this story challenges everything we think we know about life and death. But stay with me, because what comes next will change everything. Dr. Ramirez led Ethan and Emily to the National History Museum. The portrait was in the colonial wing, hanging among other paintings of governors and nobles. But when Ethan and Emily entered the room and saw the life-sized portrait on the wall, they both stopped breathing. It was like looking into a mirror through time. The man in the portrait wore Spanish soldier's armor. The woman wore a blue colonial dress with white lace. But the faces were exactly the same. Emily took a step forward, then another, until she stood before the painting, staring at her own face, painted 5 centuries ago. She raised her hand, touched the protective glass, and then something happened. Something that no one could have predicted. Something that would change everything. The world around them vanished. Suddenly, Emily was no longer in the museum. She was in an open field. Blue sky so blue it hurt to look at. Warm wind caressing her face, bringing the scent of wild lavender and damp earth. The sun burned her skin with an intensity that didn't exist in the 21st century. She looked down. She was wearing the blue dress from the portrait. Heavy silk, hand embroidery, white lace on the sleeves. She could feel every detail. The weight of the skirt, the tightness of the bodice, the sway of the jewels around her neck. It wasn't a memory. It was an experience. She was there, in 1525, living that moment as if she'd never left. And then she heard the voice, Ethan, calling her name. She turned around, and there he was. Not Ethan Blackwood in a suit, but Ethan de Alvarado in armor, young, strong, with eyes full of love and fear. "Emily," he said, and his voice was broken. "I have to leave. The battle is tomorrow." No, Emily heard her own voice respond. But it wasn't her speaking. It was the Emily from 5 centuries ago. Oh, don't go, please. I have a bad feeling. Ethan held her hands. I have to go. But I promise I'll return. And when I return, no matter what your father says, we'll run away. We'll get married. We'll have the life we dreamed of. He took the medallion from his neck, placed it on hers. This is my vow. I've searched for you in every life, Emily. If anything happens to me, if death takes me, I swear my soul will find you again, in every life, until we're together forever. Emily in the vision wept. I will wait, no matter how long. I'll wait until the end of the world. And then the scene changed. Battlefield. Sky red with smoke and fire. The smell of blood and scorched earth. Screams of dying men. Metal clashing against metal. And Ethan. Her Ethan falling. She saw it in slow motion, a spear piercing his chest. She heard the sound, felt the pain as if it were her own, saw his eyes widen in shock, saw him fall to his knees, heavy armor clutching his chest, bright red blood spilling between his fingers, staining the silver of his armor. His lips moving, forming words she could read perfectly. Emily, forgive me. I'll search for you. I promise. And then his eyes closed, and the battlefield disappeared into darkness. Another change. Emily in the castle. Not the modern Emily, but the ancient one. Black mourning dress heavy on her shoulders, open window overlooking the sea. Waiting. Always waiting. Pale hands, that's too thin, holding the medallion as if it were the only thing keeping her alive. Empty eyes. No tears because she'd already cried them all. Months passing in seconds in the vision. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. And she was withering away. Eating less. Sleeping less. Living less. Dying. Not from disease, but from sadness. Her heart broken into pieces so small, it could no longer beat. She saw herself lying in bed. White dress. Hair spread on the pillow. Hands crossed over her chest, holding the medallion. And her last word, whispered into the void. Before closing her eyes forever, I'll wait for you. In every life, I'll wait for you. And then, shock. Emily was back in the museum, falling, screaming, but she wasn't alone, because Ethan had seen it too. The moment Emily touched the painting, he touched it with her, and they were both pulled into the same vision, lived the same moments, felt the same pain, saw the same death. And when they returned, when reality pulled them back to the present, they both fell to the floor of the museum, gasping, crying, in absolute shock. Dr. Ramirez and the security guards rushed over, but Ethan and Emily could only stare at each other because they hadn't just seen the past. They had lived it. They had felt it. They had died it. And now, back in the present, they carried 5 centuries of memory and pain. Ethan cupped Emily's face. Did you see it? Did you see everything? Emily nodded, sobbing. I saw you die. I saw the spear. I saw you falling. And I couldn't do anything. Ethan pulled her into a tight embrace. I saw you waiting. I saw you dying of sadness. And it was my fault. I promised I'd return, and I failed. The guards tried to separate them, but Dr. Ramirez stopped them. Leave them. They're processing something we don't understand. Ethan and Emily stayed there, embraced on the museum floor, before the portrait that showed them alive 5 centuries ago, processing a truth that defied all logic. They were real. Reincarnation was real. Their love had transcended death. And now, finally, after 5 centuries, they were together again. But along with the relief came the terror. Because if the past life was real, that meant the tragedy was too. That meant that fate had tried to separate them before, and maybe it would try again. Hours later, Ethan and Emily were sitting in a cafe near the museum. Neither of them ate. They just stared into space, processing. Finally, Emily spoke. "I felt your death. I felt the spear piercing. I felt the pain. And I heard your last word. My name." Ethan covered his face with his hands. "And I felt your waiting. Months. A year. You withering away. And I couldn't do anything. I promised I'd return. And I left you alone. But you didn't leave me." Emily said softly, "You kept your promise. You said you'd search for me in every life. And you found me. 5 centuries later, but you found me." Ethan looked at her. "And you? You said you'd wait. And you waited?" Emily smiled through her tears. 500 years. It was worth it. In that moment, something shifted between them. The pain transformed into determination, because they had wasted an entire life 5 centuries ago. They wouldn't waste this one. Ethan held Emily's hand across the table. "I don't know how the world will react. I don't know what my family will say. I don't know how society will judge a millionaire with his maid." He squeezed her fingers. "But I don't care. I've searched for you for 500 years. I won't let the opinions of strangers separate me from you again." Emily wanted to believe him, but the fear was real. What if people judge them? What if the social difference creates problems? What if, just like 5 centuries ago, the world decided they shouldn't be together? Ethan saw the doubt in Emily's eyes. "So, Emily Carter, in front of this entire cafe and all these people, let me do what I should have done 5 centuries ago." He stood up. He knelt before her, and the entire cafe went silent, watching. "I, Ethan Blackwood, formerly known as Diego de Alvarado, I've searched for you in every life. I've dreamt of you since I was a child. I recognized your soul the moment I saw you, and now, before witnesses, I declare, you are my soulmate, my eternal love, and no matter what the world says, I will be by your side, in this life, and in all the lives to come." He pulled a ring from his pocket. It wasn't an engagement ring, it was the locket. He opened it, broke the chain, and fashioned it into a makeshift ring. It's not traditional, but it's ours. 5 centuries of waiting, in antique silver. Marry me. Emily, not out of convention, not because of society, but because our souls have already been married for 5 centuries. The cafe exploded in shocked silence. People with phones, recording, others, crying, and Emily, with tears streaming down her face, and said the only possible word, "Yes." Ethan slid the locket ring onto her finger, stood up, kissed her, and the cafe erupted in applause. But Ethan and Emily didn't hear them, because in that kiss was 500 years of searching, 500 years of waiting, 500 years of promises fulfilled. It was the kiss they could never give before the battle. It was the kiss that death had stolen. It was the kiss that, finally, they could share. When they broke apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you. I loved you 5 centuries ago. I love you now. I will love you in every life to come." Emily smiled. "Me too. Always. Eternally." If you didn't get goosebumps, comment goosebumps. Because this story shouldn't be possible, but it happened. And it's far from over. They drove back to the city that night, in the car, holding hands, planning. Ethan wasn't naive. He knew that publicly declaring a relationship with his housekeeper would be a scandal. The headlines were already being written. "Millionaire kneels for housekeeper in cafe." Romance or scam? The media would be cruel, the social media relentless. But Ethan had one weapon, The truth, and the truth, as impossible as it was, had proof. When they got back, Ethan called his PR team. He scheduled a press conference for the next day. "It's going to be a circus," his publicist warned. "They're saying you've lost your mind, that she's taking advantage of you, that it's a scam." Then, Ethan replied calmly, "I'll show them it's not. I'll show them the locket, the birthmarks and the historical documents, the portrait. I'm going to tell them the whole truth. And if they don't believe it, that's their problem." I didn't live for 5 centuries to be afraid of opinion, but Emily was afraid. While Ethan was confident, she was terrified, because Ethan was rich, powerful, used to being attacked. But her, she was just a housekeeper, poor, without formal education, without defenses. The world would destroy her. They would try to prove she was a gold digger, that she deceived the millionaire, that she forged everything. And how do you defend yourself against accusations when the truth is so impossible that no one believes it? Grandma Rose noticed the fear when Emily arrived home. She held her granddaughter's hands and said, "Honey, you have something his money never bought. You have 5 centuries of truth, and the truth always wins." "But Grandma," Emily cried, "what if they don't believe it? What if they say I'm a con artist? What if they destroy everything?" Grandma Rose smiled. "Then you'll fight. Like you fought 5 centuries ago, like you waited 5 centuries ago. And this time, you have something you didn't have before, him by your side." The press conference was the next day. The room was packed. Journalists, cameras, photographers. Ethan walked in wearing a suit. Emily walked in wearing a simple dress. And the difference between them was glaring. He, confident and polished. She, nervous and humble. The cameras clicked frenetically, and Ethan began to speak. "My name is Ethan Blackwood, and this is Emily Carter. You know us as a millionaire and a housekeeper, but our story goes far beyond that." He told them everything: the dreams, the identical birthmarks, the locket, the historical documents, the letter, the portrait, the vision. In the museum, every detail, every piece of evidence, every impossibility. And as he spoke, the room fell into absolute silence, because either Ethan was completely insane or he was telling the truth, and the truth was impossible. A journalist raised his hand. "Do you expect us to believe in reincarnation?" Ethan smiled. "No. I expect you to see the evidence and draw your own conclusions." He showed them the locket, the photos of the portrait, the documents from the archive, the birthmarks. He even touched Emily's hand, and on the projection, the marks aligned perfectly. And then he said, "Whether you believe it or not, doesn't matter, because I know the truth. And the truth is, I found my soulmate. After 5 centuries of searching, and I'm not going to let her go because of opinion." Another journalist is more cynical, asked Emily. "How do we know you're not taking advantage of him? That you didn't forge all this to get his money?" Emily, who had been silent until then, looked directly at the camera, and her voice, normally soft, came out firm. "Because if I wanted money, there are 1,000 easier ways than inventing a reincarnation story." She raised her hand, showing the locket ring. "This is worth more to me than all his money. Because this," she clutched it to her chest, "is proof that true love exists, that some connections transcend everything. And if you choose to see only social difference and greed, that says more about you than about us." The room exploded in murmurs. Ethan smiled, proud. And then he did something unexpected. He asked them to project the video of Emily singing the old song. The archaic Spanish echoed through the room, and when the translation appeared on the screen, "No matter how much time passes, my soul will search for you. I will love you in every life. I will wait until the end of the world." Some people cried, because truth has power, and that truth, as impossible as it was, had the power to touch souls. The press conference ended. The headlines came out, and as expected, there was everything. Some called it a hoax. Others, A beautiful story. There were furious skeptics and emotional believers, but what no one could deny was the evidence, the portrait, the documents, the marks, the locket. And as the days passed, something unexpected happened. People started sharing their own stories, unexplained connections, impossible recognitions, loves that defied logic. And suddenly, Ethan and Emily weren't alone anymore. They became symbols, proof that maybe, just maybe, love really does transcend everything. But not everything was celebration. Ethan's family was furious. His older brother called, yelling, "Have you lost your mind? You're going to marry the housekeeper. They'll think we're a joke," Ethan calmly replied. "Then let them think so. I don't live for approval. I live for truth. And the truth is, she's my soulmate. If you can't accept that, that's your problem." And he hung up. Emily faced attacks too. Former employers gave interviews, claiming she'd always been calculating. Neighbors made up stories. Social media branded her a gold digger. And every comment hurt. But every time Emily thought about giving up, about running away, about protecting Ethan from the scandal, he took her hand and said, "We survived 5 centuries. We'll survive this too." And he was right, because love that crosses centuries doesn't break from opinions. Ethan and Emily faced everything, together. And as they faced it, something beautiful happened. They fell in love. Again. Not just with the memories of the past, but with the present. Ethan discovered that Emily was funny, intelligent, resilient. Emily discovered that Ethan, beneath the cold mask, was vulnerable, loyal, passionate. They weren't just souls from the past. They were real people, building a real love in this life, in this time. And when Ethan finally said, one night, sitting on the terrace of Blackwood Manor on the hill under the stars, "I love you, Emily. Not just because I loved you 5 centuries ago, but because I love you now, for who you are, for who we are together." Emily knew that the promise had been fulfilled, not just found, but completed. He promised to search for her in every life. She promised to wait. And now, finally, they didn't need to search anymore. They didn't need to wait anymore, because they were together, and nothing, not death, not time, not society, could separate them again. But there was one last test, one last piece of the puzzle that destiny held. 2 weeks after the press conference, Ethan received a call from Dr. Ramirez. Her voice was trembling, excited. "You need to come back to Mexico City. I see immediately. We found something impossible." Ethan didn't ask questions. He grabbed Emily, called the pilot. And that same night, they were at the museum again. Dr. Ramirez was waiting for them with an old wooden box on the table. Her hands were shaking as she spoke. "When your story became public, we decided to do deeper excavations at the site where Lucia de Mendoza was buried, and we found this." She opened the box carefully. Inside, wrapped in preserving cloth, was a book. No, a diary. Yellowed pages, worn leather cover, but surprisingly intact. It was the diary of Lucia de Mendoza, written in 1526, the year Ethan died. Ethan and Emily looked at each other. Dr. Ramirez opened the diary to the last page and read aloud, translating the Old Spanish. "Today I received the news. Diego is dead. He fell in battle defending lands that aren't his, fighting wars he didn't choose. And I, Lucia de Mendoza, daughter of the governor, am alone. My father tells me to forget, says he wasn't worthy. But how do I forget my own soul? How do I forget the man who made me feel alive? I can't. I won't. If death separated us in this life, I swear we'll meet in the next, and the next, and in all the lives to come, because true love doesn't die. It transcends. Dr. Ramirez turned more pages, and here, she pointed out, is written a prophecy or a promise. Lucia de Mendoza wrote, "If our souls are real, if reincarnation exists, I leave this sign. When we meet again, he will search for me. I will wait. We will have the same mark. We will use the same names, and the world will try to separate us again. But this time, we will win, because love that crosses centuries is stronger than any obstacle." Ethan sat down heavily. Emily covered her mouth, tears streaming, because 500 years ago, Lucia de Mendoza had predicted everything, had written the future, or rather, had promised that, no matter what happened, they would meet, and they would win. Dr. Ramirez closed the diary carefully. She looked at them with reverence. "You aren't just a love story. You're living proof that some things transcend death, transcend time. You are what she promised 5 centuries ago. This story shouldn't exist, but it needs to be told. Because how many people in the world feel unexplainable connections and think they're crazy? How many people meet someone and feel like they've known them for lives? How many people give up because the world says it doesn't make sense? Ethan and Emily are proof that those connections are real and that they're worth fighting for." Ethan asked for a copy of the diary pages. He wanted to take them home. He wanted Emily to read the words that she herself had written 500 years ago. And when she read them, alone in her room at Blackwood Manor on the hill, Emily cried because she recognized the feelings, recognized the pain, recognized the promise. It was like reading her own soul on ancient paper and understanding that everything she had been through, all the waiting, all the pain, had been worth it because she had fulfilled her own prophecy. The wedding preparations began. Ethan wanted something big, public, a declaration to the world. But Emily wanted something simple, intimate, just for them. So they did both. First, a private ceremony. Just Ethan, Emily, Grandma Rose, and Dr. Ramirez as a witness. It was in the same place where the portrait hung, in the museum, in the colonial wing, in front of the painting that showed them together 5 centuries before. The priest who agreed to perform the ceremony was old, wise, and believed in mysteries. He looked at the portrait, looked at Ethan and Emily, and smiled. "Some souls are eternal," he said, "and you two prove it." Ethan wore a simple suit. Emily wore a humble but beautiful white dress, and when they exchanged vows, they weren't the traditional ones. Ethan spoke first. "Emily, I searched for you for 500 years. I dreamed of you before I even knew you were real. And now, before this painting that proves we were once one, I promise that we will be one in all the lives to come. I love you. In every life. Eternally." Emily held his hands, tears flowing freely. "Ethan, I waited for you for 500 years. I missed you before I even knew you in this life. And now, before this proof that our love transcends everything, I promise that no matter what destiny brings, we will be together. I love you, in every life, forever." The priest smiled. Then, "By the power vested in me, and by the power that time and destiny have already granted you, I pronounce you husband and wife, again." They kissed, and it was as if 500 years of separation finally healed. The kiss wasn't just theirs. It was Ethan Blackwood's and Emily Carter's. It was of all the lives in which they had searched for each other and had not found each other. It was of all the promises fulfilled. It was eternal. Grandma Rose cried. Dr. Ramirez cried. The priest cried. And even the museum guards, watching from a distance, felt something impossible to explain. True love has power. And that love had 5 centuries of accumulated power. But Ethan had promised a public ceremony too, and a week later, they held it. Not in some fancy church, but in Central Park, open to everyone. Hundreds of people showed up, Strangers who had followed their story online, people who believed, people who wanted to see with their own eyes, proof that eternal love exists. Ethan and Emily renewed their vows before them all. And this time, Ethan added something. For all of you listening, who doubt unexplained connections, who feel like you know someone but are afraid to admit it, don't be, because life is too short to ignore the call of your soul. Emily and I are proof that some things are real and worth it. The crowd applauded. Children threw flowers. And when Ethan and Emily kissed, the park erupted in celebration. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a symbol that love wins, that souls find each other, that promises, so even after 5 centuries, can be kept. The following months were an adjustment. Ethan and Emily built a life together. It wasn't easy. The difference in their backgrounds still created challenges. Emily wasn't used to the life of the wealthy. Formal dinners made her nervous. Conversations about investments and business made her feel small. And there were moments when she felt like she didn't belong in that world, like she was an intruder in a borrowed gown. Ethan also struggled. He didn't understand the struggles of someone who had always been poor. Why did Emily hoard food like it could run out? Why was she afraid to spend money even though she had so much now? Why did she wake up at 5 in the morning when she no longer needed to work? They were invisible scars, marks of a life that money couldn't erase overnight. But they learned together. Ethan learned patience. He learned that healing takes time. He learned to listen more and judge less. And Emily learned to trust. She learned that not everyone in a position of power will abuse it. She learned that she deserved to be there, not because she was the soulmate of a rich man, but because she was human, and being human was enough. Because what united them was bigger than what separated them. It wasn't just the memory of 5 centuries, it was choice. A daily choice to love, to forgive, to build, to be partners, not just in destiny, but in real life. Ethan created a foundation in Emily's name, the Carter Foundation, to help domestic workers, to offer education, scholarships, job training, opportunities, to give dignity to those society insists on making invisible. And Emily became the spokesperson. She traveled across the country, telling their story, not just about reincarnation, but about respect, that every person, no matter their profession or social class, deserves love and dignity, that a housekeeper is no less than an executive, that poverty doesn't define worth. And people listened, because Emily spoke with the authority of someone who had lived it, who had cleaned floors and still held her head high, who had been judged and still chose to love. And as they told their story, something beautiful happened. Other people began to come forward, people with their own stories of unexplained connections, of intense déjà vu, of impossible recognitions. Fez and Ethan and Emily realized they weren't alone. That maybe, just maybe, reincarnation was more common than the world admitted. And that maybe, just maybe, true love really did transcend everything. A year after their wedding, Emily discovered she was pregnant, and when Ethan found out, he fell to his knees and wept. Because 5 centuries ago, they never had this chance. They never had the life they dreamed of. But now they did. Now they could build the family that death stole. Emily held his face. We won, Ethan. Destiny tried to separate us twice, but this time, we won. And he nodded, because it was true. The baby was born on a spring morning. A girl, dark hair, deep eyes. And when Ethan held her for the first time, he felt something familiar, like he already knew her. Emily smiled, tired but radiant. Do you think? Ethan shook his head. I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe she's just ours. This life, this time, and that's perfect. They named her Rose, in honor of Grandma Rose, who had seen it all from the beginning, who had believed when no one else did, and who now, holding her great-granddaughter in her arms, smiled with tears in her eyes. Have you ever felt like you knew someone you just met? Have you ever had an inexplicable connection that defied logic? What story of connection have you never told? Leave it in the comments, because maybe, just maybe, you're not crazy. Maybe you're feeling something real, something that transcends this life. Ethan and Emily returned to the museum years later, with Rose, now 5 years old, holding their hands. They stopped before the portrait. The little girl looked up. She pointed. "That's you." Ethan and Emily exchanged glances. "How do you know?" Rose shrugged. "I just know." And in that moment they both understood. Some souls travel together, life after life. And maybe, just maybe, their little family was eternal. Not just in this life, but in all of them. Some connections transcend time. Some promises cross centuries. Some souls, no matter how hard destiny tries to separate them, always find their way back. Ethan promised to search for Emily in every life. Emily promised to wait, and 5 centuries later, they both kept their promise. Love conquered death, conquered time, conquered social differences, conquered everything. Because true love doesn't die, it transcends. And if you're wondering if this story is real, let me tell you. Historical documents confirm the existence of Diego de Alvarado and Lucia de Mendoza. The portrait exists, the locket exists, the diary exists. What happened between Ethan Blackwood and the modern-day Emily Carter is theirs to tell, but the evidence is undeniable, and the message is clear. Some stories defy explanation and deserve to be believed. Ethan and Emily live today in peace. They still face judgment. There are still those who say it was a hoax, that it was staged, that it was madness. But they don't care, because they know the truth. They live the truth. And the truth is that after 5 centuries, 2 souls have finally found peace. They are finally together. They finally fulfilled the impossible promise. "I'll search for you in every life," he promised, and he fulfilled it. "Me too, I searched for you," she replied, and she also fulfilled it. And now, in this life, in this time, they no longer need to search, because they've already found each other. And nothing, absolutely nothing, will separate them again. True love always finds a way, no matter how long it takes, no matter how many lives are needed, no matter how many obstacles destiny puts in the way. True love wins, always. And Ethan and Emily are living proof of that. Or rather, they are proof that transcends lifetimes. They are eternal proof. And as you listen to this story, perhaps you'll feel something, a shiver down your spine, a sense of recognition, a connection to someone you can't quite explain. Don't ignore it, because maybe, just maybe, it's your own soul remembering. Maybe it's your own promise, waiting to be fulfilled, and if it is, don't be afraid, because if Ethan and Emily teach us anything, it's this. It's worth it. The wait is worth it. The search is worth it. The love is worth it. Always. 5 centuries, 2 lifetimes, 1 promise, fulfilled. This is the story of Ethan Blackwood and Emily Carter, of how a multi-millionaire fell to his knees before his housekeeper and said, "I've searched for you in every life." And of how she replied, "Me too." And of how 2 souls, separated by centuries, finally found their way back to each other. And they lived. They didn't just exist, but truly lived. Together, eternally, as it always should have been.